we've got people from the audience and the participants suggesting questions or themes following an open space method, determining to suggest some topics for conversations, and then we're going to move to some breakout groups. So we've got quite a lot of topics on there, more topics than we have spaces to host conversations. So people are putting some dots to say which topic they would like, which conversation they would like to join. So, digital divide. Hands up. Okay. Collaboration. I think we have a few multi-collaborations. Alright, collaboration it is. So, whoever would like to go to the collaboration group, growing skills of power with not power over in a hierarchical environment, you are the Kookaburra team. And Jen, do you want to take the Kookaburra team? The Kookaburra team is in breakout 1. Okay? Lion team. Okay, how can small enterprises and not-for-profits come together on collective missions? Lion group, Selena, pop your hand up. Lion group is outside. Yes, Lion group is outside. Giraffe group, how do we invest more courageously in early stage innovation? Giraffe group is down in breakout 4 with Ashley. Here we go. And then the last group, how do you fail in service design for government without impacting people negatively, is the Pineapple group, which is outside.
Can you speak?
I'm Bo. I joined my wife today. She's a designer. Just a chance to understand this conversation a little bit more.
Thank you. And I'm Michelle, and I work with Carla at the Australian Centre for Social Innovation, and I'm here because I try to never miss a chance when Andrea's in town just to hear what she's up to next, because she's always got really great thinking that just continuing to push the space and help us understand what it means to design policy and to use design in that context.
But it's sort of kind of frame it in a more positive way.
I think this also comes into what you were saying in your speech today, which is about, so the question is, how do we fail without impacting too many people? Negatively, yeah. Impacting. I was going to try to take the pineapple.
I'll take the pineapple. Giving the users themselves, or the people who it's for, to generate the ideas themselves and test it themselves and almost enable them to do the process themselves. But also manage the expectation of what the possible is. Within our project, so we wanted to create a digital tool with young people, for example, or for young people. But when they said, well, actually the problem is the digital tool, it's the education system, we could then say, that's fine, but we can't, that's not in scope.
And it's very different to ideate for a policy versus a service. So we want to break this down a little bit further.
Every level, which is the question I put, was public, private, third sector, the not-for-profits, the housing providers. I talk to so many, they will not bring digital literacy into their programs, although in the UK it's been done, and it changes people's ability to get employment, pay their rent on time, save their shopping together, bringing social inclusion as well, because they start coming as a community. Like, there's so much evidence internationally, but in Australia, we've just got blinkers on, and we're hoping that everyone will die who can't do it or something, or don't care, that they're just getting further behind. In Aboriginal communities, it's far worse with device sharing and Centrelink. So the Centrelink, that all of those things are why we think have to be involved. But
certainly we kind of do this collaborative thing, even maybe around promoting together, what's going on, and that we do need this investment, because a lot of people don't even know. So how do we influence culture through campaigning as a collective?
Don't have a direct answer to that, because I think that is the whole challenge. But I think part of investment is thinking about how we get more out of the investments we already make. So it's not just more money, and that's where I can come back to, I think, this transparency around outcomes. I think anything that is funded by government should be a public asset, and the learnings are the public asset that we should be focused on more often than the specific. It's like any kind of early stage business. Your job is to learn, not to get it right. I mean, you are ultimately getting it right, but everyone understands there's a step and process, I think. And that's where I think you can set the conditions for a lot more innovation, even without directly funding it, if you require certain amounts of data transparency. And so I think, mining is one example. We do this at a couple of places. In mineral rights, you have a couple of years. If you choose not to exploit those rights, they become public domain, and someone else can analyse the work you've already done, rather than everyone having to go and resurvey the same land looking for different things. New Zealand is another interesting case study in the energy industry. I'm not an expert on this, I'm just relaying something that's been explained to me. But I believe there's some kind of almost disproportionate number of retail providers in New Zealand, like 40 or something for a small country. And part of that is because the regulatory environment makes all of that transparent.
Yeah, partly, but it's also...
So yeah, it's more of a question. I don't know if it's really anything.
I'm
interested in statins.
Well, I'm right at the operational end of things where I work, but I see that there's a real need for bigger thinking and strategy around what we're doing, just in terms of just basic operational things.
And I guess if you're kind of wanting some way of collaborating, I guess from the government's policy perspective, they'd like to see probably that kind of stuff aligning with that. So it's how you influence their kind of policy and way of they want it to happen with your objectives and getting those lined up so people will cooperate rather than compete with each other, perhaps.
Does everyone agree that's number one? So how do we succinctly say this? Is this about you're working effectively with government in a two-way conversation where policy and practice inform each other? Is that a big kind of...
Guys, we're going to all huddle around Kookaburra because Kookaburra is going to present to us first. So each group will have 3.5 minutes to share their key points. We've got sometimes one, sometimes more than one representative. I'm encouraging the Kookaburras, if Sarah has said something that Sarah has not said something that you think needs to be said to share with the community, please come on and share it. It's really good if that happens. All right, Sarah, you're on. 3.5 minutes starting now.
Okay, so we're just going to quickly go through kind of the way that our conversation flowed. So in collaboration, we looked at the growing skills of power with, not power over, in hierarchical environments and structures. So we really kind of started looking at the working with sharing the owl and the concentration of power and how we develop these skill sets and the model over. There was the idea of the local community having ownership over the impact and the control to minimise these negative outcomes and the power plays between traditional models of control. We talked about this force to reinforce people or make a limit around what you can do. So there's this magnetic realignment or a powering in and a clarity around the commitment of the people coming together. We talked about collaboration models and how there's typically there's this agency of people that have power because they have money and what comes with that, and that's a really hard dynamic to shift. So when you're coming together, there needs to be this real, I'm not going to put the word is. There needs to be a commitment of a giving of power, a shifting of power in that space, the space at the table. So in practice, we talked about shifting the identity of the people coming together away from the department that they're coming from, or away of the role or the project, and having this collective identity. We also talked about people in concerns to causes or skill sets and what they are aligned to, and how they can be promoted, how causes or skill sets can be promoted to change the different hierarchical structures or break them down. We had this statement that hierarchies from a common conception aren't really kind of going anywhere, and these models of partnerships that we want to move to have a real barrier where power is the barrier of moving to this partnership, and so we can have better decision making around that. There's a moving of people, or this was from a sense of the general populace, and changing the mindsets and attitudes of the people to give, government legitimacy to act in a different way. So we kind of have this collective buy-in, and then
a really important one is that we need to make change, the kind of change that is for a society to prioritize the human, which I didn't touch on. So then we also looked at problem identification. So in a traditional sense, you have the people from the ground up having a different I have arrived. So let me get back to it. So there's identification of problem, and the way that people from the ground up speak about this is very different to the way that government kind of approach that. It's a very solutions focused. Please tell me if I'm going off topic. I think I am. And then we had questions around how to agitate for real change and how to act to influence change within structures. So that was about creating, the culture of collaboration and how we can do that. So some really big, meaty things in there.
Perfect timing. All right, thank you very much. All right, so let's like to hear from the giraffe group.
So the way we approached this question, which was how do we invest more courageously in early stage innovation, was to identify some of the characteristics of where this is done well. So what we noticed about that is, first of all, you fund different types of innovation differently. So at the moment in Australia, there's there's a giant pool for social impact investment. People don't actually classify early stage capital to capital that might fund a more mature, proven idea. It's all put in one lump. However, if we did actually bracket that, you might have a better chance of actually being able to identify the sources of capital that would take a risk on ideas. The second thing that we noticed is that you can point the finger of blame to someone if it all goes horribly wrong. So in this case, for example, it doesn't fall on a minister who's funded a courageous idea to take a hit on it, because there might be something like the policy labs where they can actually be a bucket for failure or learning, depending on how you want to see it. The third characteristic was about shared risk. And here we actually noticed the opportunity for different types of capital from different sources to potentially be pooled in support of that kind of courageous innovation. So that could be philanthropic funding, it could be government funding, it could be more traditional investment funding. We also, and then the final point, and I think these are combined, is about transparency, learning, and sharing the data from these experiments, which is really important because very often, just testing an idea, even if it doesn't work, is an important outcome in itself. And that might take a bit of a culture shift in order for people to be able to kind of, see the value of that learning and actually be willing to take some risks on those types of ideas.
Awesome. All right, we've got the Lion Group.
So we were looking at how small enterprises and not-for-profits can come together on collective missions. And we went down the what is collective impact, what do we need for collective impact, and how do we run collective impact rabbit hole, which was great. So we're looking at one of the ways we can help organisations to do this is to help them understand how to have conversations around developing and aligning their values on a project and communicating the way that they want to engage with funders. In order to have a very ethical but well-structured two-way conversation about the projects that they're doing, and how often small enterprises and not-for-profits run on really tiny budgets and they're overlapping and repeating each other's work. So is there some kind of platform that we can help them develop to connect, to pool funding, to deliver the same outcomes but at a better, larger scale or over a longer period of time, and that a lot of this collective impact work takes a long time to be able to be measured to see that it has had an effect or an impact, and how can that be built in? How can we build in, we discussed the role of the need to build in an additional governance structure to make sure that the collective funding or resources are distributed effectively, and then perhaps how do we help that sort of collective organisation work in such a functional way that it can ensure that everyone's getting the resources that they need, and that the reporting to the funders is happening the way that it needs to. We were thinking that there's no point in anyone coming together on collective missions unless they're set on providing a positive outcome for a distinct and defined community or group of people, and it's very important for their voice to be part of that mission setting and value setting exercise. So how do we identify them? How do we engage with them? How do we help organisations put that up front of their collective impact projects so we have designing with rather than designing for occurring? And there was a few extra points up there on the wall, so if you want to have a look at those later, they're your bonus answers, but I think that's my 3 minutes with my cuddly lion. Thank you.
Last but by no means least, I'd like to hear from the pineapples.
Yay, pineapples. Tropical on a cold day. Bridget's doing this for extra credit.
Are you going to do the introduction or not?
Yeah, so we were looking at how can we fail without negatively impacting people. The first part of our discussion was about the paradox of wanting to move beyond the status quo, but at the same time doing no harm. So we kind of moved from there onwards.
Yeah.
Vera will talk about our first one.
Okay, so the first one that we talked about is basically this idea of framing the word fail, because fails has a very negative connotation to it, and people sometimes driven by like the fear of failure to move forward. So how can we actually frame that fail to be a learning opportunities by reflecting to what we've done instead of just kind of focusing on the fail. So the idea of that is that when we focusing on the learning or what we could learn from past projects and things like that, that we could learn more in terms of the. Am I up already?
No.
Yeah. So we can push forward and then doing the task learning mindset rather than fail fast.
So the second point was using a co-design approach, which I think some of the others have mentioned as well. The idea of shifting the process in a more equitable place, and also rather than the risk being assessed in an office detached from the situation, that the risk will be shared and defined by the group doing the design, and those with lived experience of the status quo might well have a larger risk appetite than what was imagined on paper beforehand. And our third speaker is Jess.
Sorry, I didn't come up. We also talked a little bit about about changing people's mindset about testing. And I guess that's a lot of people sort of default to user testing as like a word, but it also reflects like a bit of a mindset that they're testing their users, not testing their products or their ideas or their assumptions. So getting people to think about users as people and that, yeah.
So I guess you're testing to learn about what your assumptions are about the product and the services that you're actually trying to deliver.
Just getting people to change their mindset about, going out and prototyping and bringing in that, I guess that you can cause harm, but you still have to try this stuff.
So that's us. Well done.
Alright, so what's next on the agenda? We're going to just have a conversation. I would love us to kind of sit in an informal way. So how does everyone feel about grabbing a chair and we can try and huddle? I'm not a real fan of the broadcast. Let's try and take a seat and let's try and sit down and have a conversation. What we're going to talk about now is we're just going to talk amongst ourselves about some themes that have arisen. We're going to work popcorn style. I'll start. I'll just share some of the things that I thought were really interesting. Was the importance of relationships, the importance of working together, and how do we work in a more self-organising way that's not hierarchical. A lot of my research is about exploring how to interface on the boundaries of different organisational groups, teams within organisations. So how do we cross those boundaries? How do we involve everyone in the conversation? How do we get lived experience in there? Because all of this stuff, the future of our world has to do with all of us. So how do we contribute to conversations and to and informed decision making so that we get the outcomes that works best for everybody? That's a little round. I've lost my post-it note, so that's all I've got at this moment. But would anyone like to share some of their thoughts? Yeah?
I was really interested in that concept of liminal moments and using change to drive change, and it occurred to me that we've got a massive liminal moment happening in Australia at the moment with the NDIS, with the way that disability services are funded and provided is fundamentally changing from the government deciding services and funding them to the NDIS giving money to people with a disability to choose their own services. So it feels like there's potentially, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it just feels like there's huge opportunity within the disability services space to drive real change because the whole environment is changing, and the organisations, and I'm doing a contract for one at the moment, are really grappling with that change of how to make money, how to be sustainable, how to provide services, what a customer's going to want now and in the future. So I think there's huge opportunities.
It's a game of football. Okay, anyone? Maybe I'll leave in the middle. Who would like to? I'll say something else. I really love Kerry's point about how it's really important to understand our place within the system and to do the self-work so that we can see with eyes that are more opportunity focused. Yes?
Okay. I love the concept of becoming the trim tab. So you're not responsible for making all the change happen, but you can be the stimulus to start that avalanche. Anyone else want the giraffes? Here we go. Oh. Yeah.
I really enjoyed Martin's presentation around challenging our current views on business thinking and systems change, and that we can't do things the same way that we've always understood it. So I think for me it felt like it sort of unpacked what I learned from my MBA. And today he said, well, chuck that and let's look at what you've learned.
I've never done an MBA, you can tell, right? So.
Oh, actually, there you are.
Here I am, so don't stop, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I'd love to have more chats with you, but so I thought that was really challenging. So I'm walking away from you thinking, what next and how do I challenge that? Yeah.
So I work in service delivery, but I've worked in kind of service design policy prior. So I think for me, it's kind of how do we build the capacity of the sector to also engage in this space and become genuine partners in the design of the services that they provide. I think it's really tricky to do. And how do we also translate these terms and what we do here into something practical and meaningful for people on the ground.
It was dangerous. I liked the change of mindset from will to could, and really, be able to transform our mindsets and our thinking to making more about what's possible rather than what we can do.
Mine's a small one, but I like that how every time I hear Andrea talk, she's got different presentation, a different insight, a different learning to share with us, and I really like the intentionality of it behind it that you talked about yesterday but today as well, about when you guys in the Policy Lab do something new, like do another event, a talk, a workshop, whatever, you're bringing in something new into that practice and testing it. It's like a really nice small incremental way of how you can do it in your own practice. So I really like it. I'm going to throw it come here again.
I didn't do it there because I didn't want him to catch. Because I'm a trouble catcher. But I loved Kerry also when she talked about always looking back in yourself and look at what you're bringing to the table, the power you have, and how you're actually contributing to the problem. And having been next aid worker, every place I left I felt I was contributing to it. So it's a sad reality, but it's life. Can I not have to throw it that far because I can't throw?
I'm just interested in, I think there's a real theme that came out of most groups around our relationship with failure and how we think about failure and what failure means. I was in the group that was how to be more courageous, how do we invest more courageously in early stage innovation. But one of the interesting things that I think about that is how do we be more courageous about what we've already learned. And so from will to could, but also just what actually did happen. And so there's such a lack of transparency around the things that we've already learned. And I think that's outrageous when there's government funding going into those learnings. That's a public asset. And so I think, and the issue that we always come back to though is we need culture change in order to be more comfortable with sharing those learnings. And I kind of think that's a bit BS, and we just need to make that step. We didn't wait till there was a culture change preventing child labour. We just banned child labour at a certain point. We didn't wait till culturally we all wanted to wear seatbelts. We just required that everyone wear seatbelts. And I think at some point we're just going to require that part of the deal with accepting public funds is that you're going to be transparent about the data and learnings you created, and people will decide if they're ready for that or not. And I bet you most people will decide that they're okay with that deal, if that's just what the deal is. Who can I throw this at?
Oh, I'm gonna there was a great quote, I think you might have put it up, about you can bring all the experts into the room, but they're already outdated. And I work in academia, and I just find it incredibly frustrating because I sort of also have the practice interface where you cannot argue with any academic person, or mostly in government, because they want the expert in the room with the professorial title. But it's people at the coalface that really are the expert in this field. So how do we give them currency and a voice? Because I think we get much better outcomes if we have the people that are doing it, talking about it, rather than the people who theorise about it.
And I guess my insight from working with politicians is that's actually what they care about. So that's the thing, that the voice that they hear, they get the letters on their desk that they see in the street. Yes, there are other things, they're working in a system themselves within their own parties, but one thing I think of power for public servants is to recognise that that's another point of evidence to put into your mix to influence. But yes, I think it's a mental shift as well about what is evidence and what's not. Try and get Mark in the head.
You must have played rugby.
I just want to come back. Yeah, it was quite a good coach, but I may regret it because it was quite a long way down. Just that last observation, just to be absolutely clear here, this is a game about redefining expertise, which means it's a game about redefining power, which means that that's actually what we're all doing here. That's the most important thing I think I've got out of today. I want to go back to the policy lab. There was a bit of a chat I had with Andrew afterwards, but I've been following the work. Having started my observations this morning by suggesting what we need is a new theory, which I kind of quite like that idea. One of the things that intrigues me about Andrea's work is that that is what she's doing, but you don't necessarily tell people that's what you're doing. You actually just gradually, persistently, relentlessly reinvent the theory of the business from within. So not too many press releases, probably not too many speeches which has got theory of the business on the slide, so I get all that, and that's good advice. So to some extent, I think that's what's so serious about the Policy Lab in the UK and the way they're doing it, is that there's a genuine intent over a very, very long period to get very deep into the DNA of the system and reinvent it in that way. I think that's a very powerful observation.
Oh gosh. And like, this is just absolutely awesome, this conversation. I know, Jack, you're talking about this community being much more participatory and less about someone up front learning, but you have that combination, so that's absolutely awesome. And I guess I'm kind of interested as well how this community can go even deeper, you know, and that it's almost like I just feel at the moment, the beginning of every meeting everywhere, that we actually say, what is going on? You know, on my Twitter feed last night, it came through, we haven't got 12 years to, you know, to save the species or whatever it is. We've only got till next year. Now, I don't know what it actually is, but we're dealing with some really serious interconnected issues that bring up massive feelings, and yet we're in competitive environments. A number of us aren't sure, because we're doing this purpose work, whether we're going to be okay, because we keep giving to collective stuff at the expense of ourselves. So it's kind of like there's really, really complicated issues going on here for us individually and collectively. But we do need to work collectively, and in systems that really inhibit us doing that. So I'm just saying, you know, let's take this as deep as we can go. It also relates to what Kerry said around what's ourself in the system that a number of people have brought up. How we work together. All of that.
So I've got a bit of comment that's related to that, but it just sort of a thought that brought up. I was recently at a meeting, and it was across the social service sector, and there was someone there from the Queensland Council of Social Services, And it was like a little bit of a post-election discussion, like, how did that happen? Shock horror, what does it mean, all of that. Within that, the person who was, you know, and Quexit, as we call it, that means get rid of Queensland. But like the person from Queensland sort of stood up and just sort of give some insight into sort of saying there is a change fatigue out in the community, and there's real fear around change. And it may not be in the communities that we kind of work with, but it's in regional communities that there has been a lot of change, and the speed of change and the adaptability of communities and individuals within that is not necessarily recognised or understood better. So I think that that's holding some of that conversation back around, you know, and we know that visioning and trying to put positive definitions in there, and the kind of the pull towards the dystopian is a lot about the fear space that communities are in with change and the future. And so, you know, you can extract from that what happened in the kind of political context. But for me, what I sort of really loved about Andrea's presentation was that kind of that liquefaction idea, and that like between the change states, and that there's really opportunities for sort of interventions and behaviour changes. I think is a really strong concept. So thank you for that.
Awesome. So I'd love to hear from Andrew now, and we can have some football. So just for some context, I was in the UK about 8 weeks ago. I was actually doing an amazing course at Schumacher College, which I highly recommend. It's called Co-Creating the Emerging Future, and it was really mind-opening working with 24 change makers from all over the world, which really gave me a lot of heart around change, because I was quite despondent about my efforts to create change and feeling a lack of opportunity to do so. And even when I was in places where I felt I could make change, nothing would happen. It's very hard to create change, as you all know. Anyway, it gave me a little, made me reflect a little bit more about social design Sydney and what it could be. And just to build on what Tirani is saying, I'd love conversation. I'd love you guys to let me know, and our group, we've got new volunteers now. So I want to just stand up, volunteers. Say, go on. Diane, you're helping. You are. You like it. Craig is awesome, and he always does amazing things.
Actually, I'm not holding an animal, but I just wanted to point out at the moment, I really liked Andrea's talk about utopian and dystopian futures, and I like hanging out with positive change makers because they give me a sense of hope, but I'm really quite negative in my outlook. I think it already is too late, and possibly we need to be planning for what happens when it all falls to shit, when we've got 1 million climate refugees, when people are dropping off the perch from, you know, extreme weather events, and, you know, so yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. So, thank you. I mean, this is an important thing that we need to be talking about. There's lots of groups emerging talking about like climate grief, but there's some shit potentially going down, and we need to work together. Anyway, so we've got a feedback form. I really encourage you to leave your comments on there. And if you have any suggestions about the things we can do, I had an insight that while I may not be able to make change or support systemic change, people working together on this level, I can work on this level, and this level is you, yeah? You and all the people that you work with, and that's one way to create change, from the groundswell, from the top. So if we can hit it in all layers, then we're empowered to get stuff moving. So on that note, I'm going to, just for the context of it, I met with Andrea. She really enjoyed the last presentation. We hosted her in 2017, and she said that was a great event. I'm coming out. I want to spend a day with your community. I said to her, what will have value for you? She says, I want to learn. I want to learn from your community. And I thought, wow, you know, we can learn from each other, and I want to host more of this type of thing. So I'd like to pass over to Andrea just to give us some feedback, thoughts, takeouts, reflections. Thank you.
So I think firstly, you all passed the Saturday morning test, which I have actually done, and I once did it in a university when I had to hire security to come in, and we kicked off the brief on a Saturday morning. Because there's something very special. It's a liminal space, the weekend. It's a space where we're not talking about work, we're talking about things we care about. And the thing more than anything else I've heard today is a real passion to make stuff happen, and you're here, and those of you who know open space technology, which is this method, will know that the right people are in the room, and we always in our projects talk about getting the right people in the room. You are the right people, and so it's been a pleasure to spend time with you today, and it has also been a genuine honour to learn from you. Secondly, the quality of the conversation that you're having is incredible. We travel around the world, we get a lot of visitors come and see us, and I can genuinely say that today has been the most insightful, informative and energising Saturday that I have spent in decades. Usually I'm doing other things on a Saturday, to be fair, but it's felt like rocket fuel, and I've loved every single one of the speeches, and I really enjoyed the summations of the learning that you're having. This is really high quality debate. I would also add, you know, Jax and I were talking in London about how can we bring something new to this space, and I think we probably all agree that if we'd left in the traditional style of hearing some talks and then going, the layering of richness would have been significantly less. So this process, if it's your first time in having a go at it and dipping your toe in the water, is incredibly powerful. In my experience, the best way to do it is over 2 days, because the sleepover part of it, and particularly if you do it in a retreat, deepens and enriches in a way that is profound. So if you like today, I would recommend maybe Jax or anyone else come together and spend some time together, because I think everyone in every group that I wandered around felt that we just got going and we could have gone a lot further. So I love the fact that you've done it, I love the fact you've experimented, but yeah, take confidence and go further if you would like. And I think finally, something I didn't say in my talk, which surprised me when we set up the lab, and I think it's happened here today, was in fact the honeypot effect of when you care about something and you're doing something, it is amazing how many people will gravitate towards you. We set up the lab, and within a week people had arrived saying, I'm a service designer and I'm in government, and that no one had really paid attention to them. They were doing other jobs. And then we found these other people who wanted to build new ideas, and we helped them set up and develop their ideas. So we're incubating an artist in residence at the moment within the government. He just had an idea and he's found us, kindred spirits if you like. And I think, you know, to pay absolute credit to Jax and the work she's been doing here, this community is really, really remarkable. And I think that you are the honeypot here. I genuinely was not intending to come to Sydney. Last time I was intending to come to Sydney, but it was such a profound experience last time, I wanted to come back again. I brought Sanjam with me deliberately because I knew he would learn something as well. And it's just been such a pleasure to spend the day with you, half the day with you. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you get momentum from it. I always say our doors are always open in London. They're not actually. There's a huge amount of security. So in truth, if you do want to come and see us, you're very welcome. Yeah, it's quite an intimidating place. If you do want to come, you're very welcome. We will always host people. Yeah, come along, bring your friends. Let us know if you're coming. That's all. And a massive thank you to Jax for making this all happen.
There's an opportunity coming up, very similar to what was just described, a sleepover opportunity in an unconference. If you're interested in the social enterprise part of this, how we scale the social enterprise sector and make it a source of innovation and impact, there's something called the Social Enterprise Stand-Up Project Unconference coming up in Queensland in a few weeks. And I think it's going to be a really special gathering of people who are really deeply committed to this sector, and it's going to be 2 sleepovers from Friday night through Sunday, unconference style. Everyone will decide on Friday night what they want to do for the rest of the weekend. You can bring anything or just learn. So just if anyone's interested in that and a chance to spend a couple of days in that liminal space with what I think is going to be a really high quality group of people, Google that. And then one other thing I wanted to share, I was inspired by Kerry earlier, because I'm a big fan of people, pitching, taking every opportunity to share what they need. If you're a social innovator, but I obviously ran out of time when I was giving mine. So I wanted to mention that we're recruiting as well. I'm literally going to publish this on Monday. But you guys seem like a likely group because we're looking for people to help us operationalise and develop better process. We're kind of mad inventors inside Stuff and Good. We have a bunch of cool pieces that we need to slot together better. So I'm looking for a process triple threat. I need someone who can design, implement and manage processes all within the kind of mad, ever-evolving environment of a social startup. So if that appeals to anyone, please just connect with me on LinkedIn or talk to me in a minute. That would be great. Thank you, Jazz, for the opportunity.
I just want to thank you all for coming. Another special big thanks to the Centre for Social Justice and Inclusion, to Mitra for hosting us.
Thank you.
Great to be able to do more stuff here, and hope you all can come. Please fill out the feedback form. We are talking about doing an open space day, or maybe 2 days. Let's see, maybe we sweep over. We'll see. But anyway, if you're interested in that, just say yes on the feedback. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. So yeah, thank you again for coming, and we'll see you really soon. The 20, I think it was, I can't remember the date, 23rd or 24th, we have something. And please come to the masterclass about strength-based co-design if you want to learn more about co-design, designing with and coming from an asset-based mindset, strength-based co-design.
And can we have a big thanks for Jax?